We welcome you to Confident Living. Our guest today is John Johnson of Johnson Silks. John, we're so happy to have you here on the show and to learn more about your trade, your business, and the way you do those beautiful, beautifully designed and beautifully painted silks.
Thank you, Iris. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. I know that you've been doing silks for quite a long time, and how did you happen to start doing that? I know it's probably because you're an artist and it appealed to you, and silks are so expensive and you like expensive things.
Well, that would sound good. And I hear other artists giving their stories. It didn't start that way for me at all. It actually started 4 years ago in Seal Beach. Walking down from the pier one day, and I looked in a window and I saw this beautiful piece of fabric, and I thought, I want it, I want it. And when I went in, I found out it was a scarf, a silk scarf. It was horrendously expensive, but it also turned out that it was a textile type shop where they sell art supplies and things. And the manager there said, well, you could learn to paint this. And a couple hours later, I walked out with my first silk supplies and paints and dyes and brushes, and that's actually how I started.
Fantastic. Well, I've seen some of the fashion shows that you've presented and some of your wonderful fabrics and wonderful wearing apparel. And I'm very pleased to have a few things in my closet. And I'm sure you recognize that what I'm wearing today is a Johnson silk.
That's right. I remember painting it.
I'm going to show this to the audience, and perhaps you'll do a little commentary for me.
Although I only work with silk.
Yeah.
And this is a silk chiffon. Most ladies are familiar with chiffon, but for those in your audience that aren't, chiffon's a sheer fabric,
yes,
as versus crepe, such as your dress that's underneath, is opaque. There's all kinds. There's like maybe 300 types of silk on the market right now, and silk comes from different places in the world. But this is a chiffon. Each silk paints differently and has a different flavor. This is much lighter and flowier than, for instance, in the crepe, but it also will drape different. So there's in the feel, or what we call the hand, is different. The texture from each type of silk in the weave in the silk.
I particularly love this, and I love the undergarment too. And I think it's marvelous that you designed the undergarments to go under your hand-painted silks.
Right. We do a complete set. So they're combined. They're separates, but that way they all go together and the colors all match.
Yes, and another thing, I like it that these can be worn in various ways. They can be tied and worn in a certain way. The bottoms can be changed in various ways. Would you like to say something about that?
Well, it's interesting. I had started to mention, we've showed you different ways that the jacket, this actually is called a swing coat, a three-quarter swing coat. And you have it knotted on the sides, but it can be worn, oh, if I can do this quickly, here. You do great knots, Iris. But it would hang longer on the one side without, so you have it knotted up. But it could be knotted, tied across the front, or it can actually be raised, and now you can start turning it into like a cocoon jacket. And what it does is it gives it a lot of flexibility in the way that you can wear the piece. That way it makes it more versatile, and therefore I think a much better investment and much more interesting. The garment itself, which we hadn't even talked about it, each piece is one of a kind. There are no two alike, so each one is a complete original. There's not another one like it. So there's a lot in a particular garment that makes it unique and original, not just the design and pattern itself, but the way it can be worn in the sleeves. Like you have the kimono sleeve, you have tied so you can slip it up, but it could be untied. But actually the jacket itself in the chiffon can be tied up. It could actually be worn as a blouse over slacks because the chiffon is so light, whereas the crepe, which is a little heavier in the dress that you have on underneath, that wouldn't be as practical to do. But it's fun in the texture. It feels good.
Yeah.
That's one of the main things that I found really appeal to me in painting.
I like it that it flows when I walk.
Mm-hmm. It does, and it gives. I enjoy watching how people respond when they put on a garment, be it a swing coat or a robe or a jacket, or I have three-piece dresses. They like come to life. They have an emotional response. It took me a couple of years to realize that that was very much part of what was going on with what the net result of my painting, which then ultimately went from scarves into little blouses, into jackets, into ball gowns now everywhere. But the emotional response is there. And someone mentioned that to me last week. It's sort of much like a lady has when she goes out for a wedding gown. It's a very special feeling when she's looking for a wedding gown. And a lot of times women are caught by surprise because they'll come into the showroom thinking like, well, I'm going into Nordstrom's or Saks and I'm shopping, and you find something neat. But this is an emotional response. It's a little bit different because you do the touchy-feely part and how it makes you feel or will allow yourself to feel. Like you said, the flow. But then you walk different. You carry yourself different. And I like watching what that does to ladies. It's very enjoyable.
I think many of the ladies who buy your garments and try them on feel as if they're Loretta Young when she used to have that TV show where she came out on the stage looking smashing and walked with her garments flowing behind her.
That's right. The thing that Loretta Young, that image is really good, and depending on the age of the viewers, but that ultimate femininity, what I find interesting today in garments, ladies' garments, is there's not a lot of feminine clothes, which you don't really think about because if you go into a dress store to buy a dress, you would assume it's feminine. But all those clothes don't engender that feminine feeling.
Yeah.
And silk is one of those things that do, especially in the long lines. You could buy a fitted silk suit, but that would be a different feeling, even though the fabric of the silk's the same. So that, like the Loretta Young feeling or Ginger Rogers kind of thing, the dance, the ball gowns, that whole flavor of feminine, to a large extent, is missing in the garment industry today for ladies. And perhaps it seems to overflow also into social occasions as well.
Yes, and that's unfortunate because we women need to stay feminine, and many feel feminine, but they don't dress that way.
Right,
and I know when they come to your shop for fittings and to choose something, very often you design for that specific individual, correct?
About half the time.
Yeah.
Although all my designs are original, I do the designs, and we have inventory in stock. You're absolutely right. More often than not, a lady will come in and we'll custom design something completely just for her.
Yes. Well, we're fortunate in this area to have you be able to do that for us, because it's, as you said, it's hard to find feminine things. And I haven't seen any of yours that are not feminine. Even the shirts, the shirts.
That's right.
They are very feminine as well. I know I gave one to my sister in Kentucky, and she was so delighted with it, and she was delighted with the versatility. She was so pleased that she could wear it so many different ways. And she wore it much as I'm wearing this one to church one Sunday morning, but she's worn it to other occasions, worn in various ways.
Well, that's what's nice, and I'm finding that as much of the appreciation of the garment is educating the people to the ways that they can wear them. And that's a big part of sales in general.
Yeah.
And the lifestyles now that we have seem to be so much more casual, but there's my favorite look is a very dressed up casual.
Yeah.
That's my favorite look. So a lot of what I do is compatible with that.
Well, that's typical California living, the dressed up casual. And I say California because this is where we live, but throughout the United States,
That's
it's
right.
the same thing.
Exactly. That's right. And input that I've had in the last few months, that it's even becoming more international.
Yeah.
Very much so, particularly in Europe.
Yeah.
There's a dress up casualness kind of there. I know when I lived in France, it was like that to some extent, but I think it's even more so now. So we're really becoming more global, And as much as I can use those words, it's taken me a few years now to realize we really are living it.
Yeah.
And the impact is so subtle, but absolutely right. We think because we're in Southern California, but it would be amazing because we could be walking on the streets of London right now and feel very, very much the same.
That's true, or France, or Japan.
That's right.
Or wherever. And I know I recently spent a month back in Kentucky and drove to Greenwich, Connecticut and back. And it was amazing to me that in all the shops, it was everything looked the same, regardless of which state I was in.
Right.
And I found that very interesting because we usually think of different states as being more ethnic in their own right. They're not. They're universal, which is what you were saying about the global level.
Right. Well, and that's for the people that don't move around or travel.
Yes.
They really don't realize that. You're
Yeah.
right. I mean, we're still somehow sitting here thinking in the South has a certain attitude, and if they live in the East, it's a certain way, and in Seattle, it's a certain somehow. And it's amazing how much more similar we all are today than how different we are. And you're absolutely right. So when you get out there and you see it, a lot of reasons for that too, which is probably a whole nother show.
Yes.
Which makes the Johnson silk business one of the main reasons that makes it unusual is because we are one of a kind, and it is very, very specific. As versus like if you go into Nordstrom's, Sears, Mervyn's, Saks, it doesn't matter what level it is. These are chain stores that not only are national, most of them are now moving international, they carry the same merchandise.
Yeah.
And the more that happens, the more everyone is buying the same goods and looking the same and behaving the same. And it's so the whole world's shrinking in that respect. So something like a Johnson Silk is really original. Conversely, everybody else, you're just as likely to go to a city on the East Coast and they're wearing something that you bought yesterday on the West Coast because you're all shopping in the same stores, buying the same merchandise. Not with a Johnson Silk.
Exactly, and I love that. And women, generally speaking, love having something original, something special for themselves. And I'd like to talk a bit about how you design and how you choose the color, because to me, color is one of the most yummy aspects of our lives, and color is so important in our lives.
Probably as an artist, that's, without being egotistical, I guess, that's really what I specialize in. I'm very good with color as an artist in terms of graphics and a number of items, doing prints or specific designs. That's not an ability that I have. I do seem to be very good with color. I like it. I relate well to color. I think it has a big emotional response on you. For instance, the set that we're in here now, the green, the color of the flowers and the colors on the walls around us is a very comfortable, soothing feeling. Whereas if all the walls were painted red, for instance, or bright yellow, you have to sort of take a moment and visualize, if just surround yourself with a solid color, what impact it would have on you. From there, then it comes down to subtle like things, the color you put on your body and how it affects you visually. You're absolutely right. So that's part of the fun I have as an artist. Everything I paint starts white to begin with. I put it out on large frames in my studio.
So you buy the rolls of silk, white silk?
Bolts, 50-yard bolts. And I string them out on big frames, much like you would if you were embroidering. You remember the old embroidery hoop, only mine are like 4 feet wide and 7 yards long, which is like 21 feet. And so it's perfectly flat. Also, I keep referring to hand painting the silk, but I don't use paint at all. It's all dye. Big difference. Paint lays on the surface of this fabric, whereas dye gets absorbed. So after I paint on silk with dye, it has to be steamed. That's what sets the color. That's also why the silk flows, is because it's dyed and not painted. A painted piece of fabric, and you'll notice this particularly on t-shirts, sweatshirts, will be more rough, it'll break.
Heavy in spots?
Yeah, heavy in spots, you can feel it. It doesn't even roll, let alone flow, because it's painted, especially the metallics. But that's that gives you the idea of the difference between paint and dye. the dyes then can blend together. So I can begin choosing colors and put them side by side. And as they layer on one another, as they run into one another, much like the jacket that you have on, you can, I don't know if it's visible on here. That's good. Yeah, just hold it up like that. The lines, like you can see down here, is different shades that I've laid on here and different degrees of wetness. And that will affect how it flows. Just those main qualities there. Then on a more technical basis, each color has its own qualities. For instance, blue will not spread as fast as yellow, even if it's the same amount of liquid. Let's say you took a teaspoon of sugar, and you can either add 1 teaspoon of water or 2 teaspoons of water or 3 teaspoons, so you'd have different degrees of thickness of the sugar. But if you use blue sugar instead of yellow sugar and add 1 teaspoon of water, it'll be different, even though the amount of water you added was the same, just based on the color.
So you have to be a chemist as well as an artist.
To a certain extent, yeah, you really do. In the beginning, it took me a while to realize that, because there was a lot of problems going on, or a lot of effects going on, that I didn't understand what was going on. Then after I sort of got the handle of that, then I began to realize, the weather, big difference.
Oh, like making fudge.
That's right. I could paint in the morning, and if I stopped and came back in the afternoon, I couldn't get the same effect, even on the same piece of fabric. So now when I paint, I start and I don't stop till it's complete, or I have to be complete with a certain phase of it, because the weather can change from morning to afternoon. The lighting will have a lot to do with that, because that affects the heat as well in the room. So I have skylights where I am now, but I could start in the afternoon and I have daylight, and then fine, a break for dinner, come back, it's dark. Something's wrong, it's not the same. But the light's gone, and now the weather's changed. My studio particularly is a very good size, so a lot of times I even get an atmospheric kind of thing if I'm doing a lot of things, because I can have a lot of silk out that's damp. Now I have a lot of dampness in the air. Now I have humidity. So that affects drying time. So it's sort of all like a little game, but that also tends to keep everything original and one of a kind. So even when I do a kind of duplicated work, it all comes out different.
And that's the joy of it all. It must be quite something when you have classes there and have all those different people painting.
It's fun. It's lots of fun. And I really encourage different ladies that come to shop, or different people just to come and look, because a lot of people come just to come to the studio and see the painting process as well as the clothes. But I encourage, come and paint your own silk, and then we'll make your own. You'll make your own clothes.
I was just going to ask if anyone has ever designed their own silk and painted it themselves. And then you've done it.
Yeah, I've had a couple of ladies that have done that. They really have. A couple of times it went an entirely different direction than what I thought it would go. It usually starts off, I can't do this, John, and I don't have the ability. And I'm like, sure, you can do this. That's really great. And I've worked with a couple of studios, because I have, part of the uniqueness, I have one foot in the art to wear world, big time, which is a very specific, that's sort of like art shows, craft fairs, things like that. Then I have the other big foot is in the retail garment industry, which is a totally different kind of thing. That's your Mervyn's, Saks, Nordstrom's kind of thing. So it's two different things. So working with a lady and saying, well, come in and you can paint this. No, I can't. Yes, you can. But when I throw a person into painting, I don't usually sort of do the generic, let's sit down and we'll take the first 4 hours of the class and we'll read the books, and this is a paintbrush, and this is the dye, and this is the silk, and this is where the silk comes from. I don't operate that way. It's just sort of like, here it is, it's all done, and within 5 minutes start painting. And it's amazing how difficult it is to put that first mark on the piece of silk, and how intimidating it is. And you don't come to that right off the hand. If you were to go right now and somebody put down in front of you a piece of blank white paper and said, I want you to draw a picture, putting that first mark is very hard for most people.
I'm sure.
Because you think, I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to waste the materials. This is expensive paper. My time, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yes. And we want to do it right.
That's right. Absolutely right. And my gosh, what if you make a mistake? The wonderful thing about silk painting is it is very, very forgiving. You really can't go wrong. And that was one of the most wonderful things that one of the instructors I had at the beginning said. The worst case you can have with silk is you end up with black. And in 4 years, I've never had a black piece, which is really amazing. But that gives you such an incredible amount of confidence that you cannot hurt it, and you really can't. And most of the times, the very best work I have done has come out of what I call damage control, because you have an idea, you have a concept, and you start off and you're going to do this, and oops, I dropped something, and now you have an error, or you have what you call as a mistake, or it wasn't what you planned. Now you've got to correct for it, and you have to compensate. And out of that comes the most incredible things, which is sort of like life. You know, at first, you know, you're devastated by, oh, it wasn't what I expected, what I had in mind. And if you just sort of back off and give it a little minute, some of the best things come out of that. So it's just great. So now I don't sweat it too much. And
that's really exciting that you can teach your students that there is no right or wrong way. It's just whatever happens, happens, which, as you said, that's life. And if we could live life more fully in that way, what greater happiness there would be on earth, and less tension.
It does. It makes a lot of difference. A friend of mine had pointed out that it was like when we were raised, when you colored, we were raised with coloring book mentality.
Yes. Keep within the lines.
Keep within the lines, that's right. And if you went outside the lines, it was the worst thing you could do. And maybe that's a way for some people to live. I don't know, and they're comfortable with. I have a difficult time staying within the lines. Always have had. So that's why silk painting works great for me. It's really wonderful.
But that's why you're an artist.
That's part of it. And but I've also noticed too, because I've done a lot of different kinds of artistic things, not just painting with watercolors or oils, but I've done pottery, ceramics, things like that. But it was the thing that ultimately got me was just the fact that I can touch this, I can feel it. And not only that, but then when you're done, there's so many things you can do with it. So it's also practical. There's that part of me. So I like that a lot, that you can do with it. In this case, you can wear it, but you can hang it on the wall. You can make kites. You can, you know, there's a lot of things you can do.
You have always been so creative. I remember something on your dining room wall once. It was a huge hanging and it had faces in it.
Oh, the mural. Yeah. Right. That I did. Oh gosh, like live casts, right, of my friends, friends that I knew. That's right, that had the nerve to let me do this to them. And then I ended up with these masks and what to do with it. So I did. I put it on this, this huge mural. I think, what is it, 8 foot? It's almost 8 foot tall and about 10 foot wide.
Yes. That was really outstanding. And your clothing reminded me of that because it was so creative, it's so individualistic, and that's the way the clothing that you design.
Yeah, that's very much my style. Very much my style. The couple of people have referred to it is, not so much even impressionistic, but is a descriptive style. It's like clouds on those rare days, mostly when we were in the Midwest or something, where you could look at the clouds in the sky and you'd lay there and you go, oh, this reminds me of a lamb or a plane or something. And I very much have always gravitated towards that in those kinds of things. And that's very much how I paint now. So if this was the jacket you're wearing now, was put into a solid piece, you could and hung on a wall, you could visualize different images or concepts in it. And I find that very interesting myself. I realize other people, they want to see a tree, know it's a tree, and it's always a tree. And that's great. That obviously there's a time and place for that, but on a day-to-day kind of thing, I like that fluidity.
Yes. So one can use their own creativity in deciding what it is and in choosing in an individualistic way.
That's right.
And I commend you, John, for adding so much beauty to the world, for giving grace and charm and beauty, because As we were saying in the beginning, there's not enough of that in the world today.
That's true.
And
That's true.
it's very exciting that you're doing that.
It brings a lot of joy to people.
Yes.
On a lot of levels, and painting the silk has never been about selling clothes for me. It's been I'm actually very selfish because of the joy, and then you end up with this.
Yes.
But then watching the people again respond on all levels, not just wearing the clothes, but on occasion when I can get someone to come in and paint, or even watch or observe the process, and they're absolutely amazed at what's really involved because you don't know. But life's sort of like that.
Yeah.
You think you understand a lot about something, and then all of a sudden you go, I never knew that at all. We can admit that about a car.
Yes.
You open the hood and you go, wow, I'm impressed. Close the hood. That's only my own self. That's not a reflection on anyone. But it's difficult to understand everything. We talked briefly, computers. There's different things that we can understand. We think they know how they work, and some things are not simple at all. And very, very gifted people are the worst of all because they make the most difficult things look so easy.
Yes.
I think that was so apparent at the Olympics.
Yes.
These incredible sports people. And you go, oh my God, and you don't realize the work, the training they've gone through. And they just make it look so simple. They just dive off of a board, or they do the gymnastics. And my gosh, it's incredible.
That same rule applies when we see your beautiful fabrics. The fabrics you've created through your own creativity and then are available for being put into the form that whatever the customer wants, long, short, medium, jacket, scarf, whatever. That's the very same idea, and it's so exciting.
Well, it's been really interesting trip in the evolution of going. Now, of course, the newest thing that I'm involved in is what I call ball gowns, and I'm working with a number of ladies that, in fact, I'm working with an opera singer in Chicago, which I'm very excited about. But now we're creating the gowns from the ground up, which is really great. So you have ball skirts and tops and jackets and long scarves and with matching jackets, and it's a very exciting new direction that I'm evolving into.
John, that is so very exciting, and I look forward to hearing more about it. And we thank you for joining us on Confident Living, and I know that you've enjoyed seeing John Sun's silks and also hearing about his work. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.